Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. I think this story does belong here since it's about people completely disregarding what private property means. I decided to write it after an incident last week, but this is something that has been happening for at least 12 years. I'll start off with some background in order to explain why the situation has become so infuriating by now, so I know in advance it's going to be long. I live in a small apartment building on a very busy street, with a small plaza with a school right across the street, as well as plenty of shops and banks around, so you can imagine there are way too many people passing by every day. Almost all apartment buildings have their main entrance right on the sidewalk, but in our case it's different. In order to get to the building entrance, you enter a short and tiny path, a few steps long, which has a staircase to the basement on the left side and a few steps going up on the right, so you go up the steps and there's a little open space with the building door. This path is obviously part of the private property that comes with the building, and it's obvious from the fact that it is between the building and the adjacent piece of land, and is not part of the public sidewalk. This, however, has not stopped people from using this open space as they please, as if they own everything here and can do whatever they want. The thing is, all residents here are also owners of the respective apartments they live in, just like the apartment I live in is owned by my family, and have been living here for at least 17 years, so you can imagine that by now they are all sick of this type of situation because it's their own. Actual property. The most common occurrence was people using the left staircase, the one leading to the basement, as their personal toilet. They'd literally just take a short detour from the sidewalk into our private property, go down the stairs and do their business. Until a few years ago when we installed metal gates to block access to the basement, this was an almost daily event. I mean, there is a pizza place right across the street, a coffee shop right next to the path entrance, and a few other coffee shops around the area, but I'm guessing people preferred our basement because it was free. I'd hear stories from my mom who would happen to be present when random pedestrians thought of using her basement, and she'd tell me how she yelled at them. I only happened to run into one person, an old man, while he was doing his business, and I yelled at him saying, "Have you seen me come to your home to urinate?" What gives you the right to do so at my home? And when he replied, "I have a condition that requires me to visit the bathroom frequently," I said, "If you need a bathroom frequently," I said, "if you need a bathroom. There are so many places around here that actually have one. And if you need a free one, then go urinate on your own doorstep. Otherwise, don't bother leaving your home at all." People probably heard me all the way to the bus stop next block because I was getting stares when I got there. Could have also been because of the fact that I was furious and literally shaking. The other common occurrence is young people using this area as a hangout spot and littering. Our apartment building has 3 apartments used as learning centers. One is for computers, so it gets mostly teenagers, and the other 2 are for elementary school kids. The elementary school kids come and go with their parents, so we have no problems with them, but the teenagers are a different sort. Those would sometimes use even the inside of the building, talking and smoking and littering. Thankfully, this only lasted a short while because they'd get caught by my mother and her brother. I'm not talking about waiting around for a few minutes for your friend to come downstairs so you can leave together. I'm talking about staying for over an hour, being loud and throwing trash around. As if the teenagers were not enough, during the quarantine our property would be used as a hangout place for people of older ages as well. They'd grab coffee from the coffee shop next to the path entrance, and then come to the building entrance and hang out, talk loudly, and always litter. Since then, it's more common to find trash laying around every morning than it is to not find anything. This brings me to last week's incident. It was around 1:20 a.m. when I started hearing sounds of people laughing, hitting each other, and talking loudly this late at night. There is also a chance they had come earlier, and I had not noticed. After so many years, it feels like white noise if it's below a certain noise level, though that's highly unlikely because my balcony is right above the building entrance, and that group was way too loud. I live 3 floors above ground. My balcony doors, which provide decent soundproofing, were closed, and those people still sounded like they were next door. It's not like I was trying to sleep and they were disrupting the silence. I was just annoyed because it was really late at night and they had no business being there in the first place. So after waiting 20 minutes to see if they would leave and hearing that they hadn't left, I stepped out onto the balcony to observe and see whether I would need to intervene. Upon stepping outside, I saw a big group of boys, probably within the 15-20-year-old range, just being too loud and acting like they were at their own home. To be honest, I usually feel a little scared when it's just me against a big group, even from the safety of my home, So I didn't immediately say anything, and being on the third floor, they never noticed me. I observed them for about 10 minutes in order to make sure I needed to intervene, and to gather enough courage to do so, or rather, to gather enough anger so I would not care about being afraid. After observing them for those 10 minutes, I saw that they apparently had no intent of leaving or lowering the sound levels. They were also smoking and throwing their cigarettes on the ground right in front of the building. One of them threw his still-lit cigarette in the vacant piece of land next to ours, which has green plant. At that point, I was fuming. Enough is enough. We don't need a fire on top of everything. So I was waiting for a trigger to set me off. That was when I saw one of the boys who had left a few minutes earlier come back with a snack. The coffee shop at the path entrance is open 24/7. Tear off a piece of the packaging. Throw it on the ground. Take out the snack and throw the rest of the packaging on the ground. That was when I lost it, and I suddenly yelled, in the middle of the night when none of them was expecting to hear a voice, "Is that how you throw trash around in your own home?" I swear, the look of shock and mild terror as he looked up was so worth it. He stuttered, "No, I'm going to throw it away, I swear." I had no more patience, so I said, "You pick it up and throw it in the trash bin this very moment in info." The trash bin is right at the path entrance, literally a few steps away from where he was standing, and all of you get up and get out of here. If you want to hang out, the plaza across the street is a fine spot. One of them tried giving me an attitude, saying, or what? "You'll call the police." I said, "We have every right to do so. This is private property. Go on public property, or if you have the guts, go to your own homes to be so loud and to throw cigarettes and trash around." They slowly got up and started going down the steps to exit the property. The one with the attitude tried making a joke. "It's our citizen right to be here." And I said, "For public property only. Get out of here and good riddance." I stayed there watching to make sure they all left. The one with the snack packaging was looking up the whole time as he was leaving, either to check whether I was still there or to remember my face, but they all left and didn't come back. I swear, the adrenaline rush after they left was so much it took me another 2 hours to feel sleepy again. But it was definitely worth it, not just because I kicked out people who had no business being there in the first place, but also because I was always afraid to say anything when it was more than one person, and everything worked out well. To be honest, I was afraid of any possible retaliation from their part in the upcoming days. But so far, it's been 5 days and everything is okay. Edit. For everyone who says to put gates up front, you are indeed absolutely right. It is something that the owners had previously discussed because the situation was too much. However, the cost was high, the owners were few, and there were still a couple of them who didn't want to pay their share, which means that the cost was even higher for those who wanted it. That was why we opted for at least blocking access to the basement for sanitary purposes, and hope to eventually come to an agreement for a gate up front. Till then, we can only keep our eyes open. Back in the early 2010s, I started working for a big internet-based company in the UK. The company was opening a new office with a new subdivision in London. When I started, there were 2 team leaders and the office managers. The 2 teams were the content team and the SEO search engine optimization team. I was recruited to be the development team lead, that is, web development. When I was interviewed for the job, both the office manager and SEO team lead were carrying out the interview. As you do in interviews when they asked if this or that could be done, I would respond yes, of course, or, you would get a better result doing X, Y, or Z. So I got offered the job, and for the first year, there was so much going on. As well as building a team, I also had a portfolio of websites that needed to be redeveloped and redesigned. It was at this point that some red flags started to pop up. I would have the SEO team lead, we will call him Andy, coming to me and telling me that I needed to do things the way he wanted. I would always push back and say no, and give a reason why I was doing things the way I was. Andy would get irate and would complain to the office manager about me. When the office manager would ask me about it, I would explain what had happened and why I'd said no, and the office manager would leave it there because at the end of the day, I was the one with the experience in web development, not Andy. This happened a few times over the first year, and I then realized that the reason that Andy was getting so irate was because he thought that I would be a yes man to him. Sorry, buddy, that is not who I am. So, now that we have the backstory, let's get into what led to the revenge. Me and the team had been working hard to get 2 of the new websites completed, and I was due to show them off to the board before they went live. This company's head office was in another part of the country, and I had to leave the office in London at about lunchtime. So, I arrived to the hotel, that is across the road from the head office about 4 and jump on my laptop to start going through the sites to run some tests. I was testing functionality, making sure the look and feel were correct, things like that. Then it happened, we found a major bug that caused a major issue with the functionality of the website. So it is at this point that I'm going to introduce the star of our story, Johnny, not real name, but attacked all the same, who was my senior developer. Me and Johnny working through the night, me in the hotel room and him in the London office. We finally fixed the bug about 7 a.m. the following day. My meeting with the board was at 10 a.m., so after getting showered, feed, and over to the office, I started my day with 0 hours sleep. I go into the meeting, and the first thing that is said is the CEO asking if I was okay. I had met him a few times, and he was a really nice guy. I explained that we had found an issue with the sites yesterday, and me and Johnny had worked through the night to fix it before the meeting. Long story short, everyone was really impressed and loved the new sites. At the end of the meeting, the CEO pulled me aside and thanked me for everything and then told me to go home and get some sleep. It was about a 3-hour train ride to London and then another hour home. I thanked him and went on my way. So, after taking my team out for a well-deserved lunch to say thank you, the office manager then organized a night out for the whole office to celebrate on the following Friday. We started off at a fancy bar, not my sort of thing. I am a man of cheap tastes, and then everyone moves on to a small club. I go to the club for a bit, but then leave quite early in the night because I need to get a train home. I say my byes and then head home. I come into the office on the Monday, and there's something going on. I speak with Emma, not real name, the content team's lead. She does not know what is going on, but there are people from head office, HR, and others. Then a few minutes later, all the team leaders are called into a meeting. We are all squished in one of the small meeting rooms. There is office manager, 2 members of the HR team from head office, and the 3 team leaders, including myself. So, HR explained that there's been a complaint made against Johnny. A member of the SEO team, we will call him Mark, had called Andy on the Friday saying that Johnny had been making racist comments while everyone was out at the club. Both myself and Emma were taken aback. This was not like Johnny. On a side note, I felt that I need to explain the races of people involved. This is just for context and not an attack on anyone involved. Johnny, Emma, and I are white British. Andy is African, born in Britain, I believe, and Mark is Indian, once again, I believe. So, the whole day was spent with HR doing interviews with the other people that were there that night, and we then all reconvened towards the end of the day. The result of the interviews were that no one had heard anything like what Mark was saying. So, it was Mark's word against Johnny's. This was not acceptable for Andy. He wanted Johnny fired and cried we could not have someone like that in the office. So, both Emma and I looked at each other, and though that it was strange that he was so instant on firing Johnny with no evidence, both the office manager and HR agreed, and Johnny was let off with a warning and to be aware in the future of how things he says that could be misinterpreted. Life went back to normal in the office, that is, until about 2 months later. The story of what had happened had gone around the office, about 12 people. Then one afternoon, I was pulled aside by one of the guys on the content team, and he said that he had overheard Andy and Mark talking and thought I should know. We went into one of the meeting rooms, and he laid everything out. What I heard made my blood boil, and I think had I been in a cartoon, steam would have been erupting from my ears. He told me that the racism complaint was faked and a plan that Andy had to attack my team because I would not bend to his demand. Him and Mark were on a call outside the club. Andy was not there that night, and that is when he heard what they were doing. It later came out that their plan was to make the complaint against Johnny and get him fired, which would then lead on to Andy complaining that I was not fit to run a team if I let that sort of this happen under my leadership. My first question was why he didn't bring this up with HR in the interviews. He said that he did, but it was his word against both Andy and Mark. I thanked him for this and went on with what I was doing. I was pissed. There was no way that I was going to let this slide, but I knew that if I was going to go after them, I needed to have everything in place beforehand. I didn't tell Johnny what I'd been told and asked the guy that told me to keep it to himself for now. I didn't want Johnny to get pissed off and do something that would get him fired or word affect any revenge I could dish out. So I watched. I watched everything the SEO team did and didn't do. Then it happened. It was like angels had descended from heaven to deliver me the winning lottery ticket. The building we were in was a 3-story building with a main stairwell with a door on each floor to the offices. The stairwell also led to a door out to the street. At the time, I was a casual smoker and used it to get a break from the screen and clear my head if something I was working on was not going well. So, I walk out of the door to the office and into the stairwell, and who is there? Mark, of all people. He is on the phone, and he goes white as a sheet when he sees me. Now he is mid-sentence with the person on the other end of the phone, and as I am walking past, he is forced to carry on the conversation. I overhear, and from what he is saying, I can tell that he is talking to a school or something like that. The conversation sounding like he was looking for information about applying and about a visa. I thought that was a strange call to be having, and something was fishy about it. I had my suspicions as to what was going on, but nothing concrete at this time. A few days later, I was heading back up to the head office, and by that time we had a new office manager who lived near the head office, so was based there most of the time. When I got there, I dropped my things off at the hotel and headed over to the office. I went to his desk and asked to have a quick chat. I explained to him what I had overheard Mark talking about on the phone and said that maybe the company might like to look at his visa status. So a week went by and nothing seemed to happen. Then bam. He stopped showing up to the office. A few days later, I got told what had happened from one of the other SEO team members. Mark had been fired with immediate effect for no longer having the correct visa to work in the UK. The company did not want to get involved in sponsoring a new visa for him. I don't know why. I started asking questions around the office, random chit-chat, and I found out that Mark is from Dubai and he was here on his wife's student visa. I don't know how that works, but it was all above board. I also found out that his wife's course had finished and that left them with a small window of time to get a new visa. That is when it all clicked. Now, there are some doggy people in London and everywhere else, and they would set up these fake collages that would sign people up to get visas to live and work into UK. At some point before or after this, saw a program on this, and normally these were set up in tiny offices that you couldn't swing a cat and let alone be a college. They were used as postal address for the college, and they would charge a course fee to be enrolled and thus be able to apply for a student visa. So what Mark was trying to do is to get enrolled in one of these colleges so that he could stay in the UK and carry on working. I found out a few weeks later that Mark and his wife did have to leave the UK and go back to Dubai because he didn't have any money coming in to pay for his new college course. Bye, Mark. When I found out that Mark had been let go, I pulled Johnny aside and filled him in on everything. He could not believe it and was stunned that they would try and do that. I apologized to him as it was my fault that he had been targeted by them in a way to get at me. He would not accept it and said that I had gone above and beyond in defending him. Following on from this, I made it quite clear to Andy that I know what he and Mark had done, and I would not be forgetting it, and to watch his back. I made sure we were not in earshot of anyone else. About 2 months later, Andy handed in his notice and left the company, never to be seen or heard from again. I have told this story to some people over the years, and I have been asked so many times if I feel guilty for what I did. I always respond the same way. I feel guilty that Johnny was wrongfully accused and targeted. I don't feel guilty about what I did to Mark. You don't mess with my friends, family, or team. Okay, so just a bit of backstory here. I grew up a Navy brat to immigrant parents. They were both born in Mexico, but my dad went to high school and college in California. He became a naturalized citizen and joined the Navy while we went to his first station in a dock, Alaska. It was just me, my older brother, and my mom. My mom didn't speak a lick of English, but my brother had started picking it up at school. By the time we got stationed in Illinois a few years later, my brother was fluent and I had started learning a little bit from Sesame Street. So one day my mom took us to the mall. My brother immediately ran off to go play in the arcade, and we would meet up later at a certain time at the pet store. Once all the shopping was done, my mom and I headed to the pet store, and I went to explore and look at all the animals. I went further towards the back and found a lot of empty cages and fish tanks for sale. In the corner of all that, there was a large bird cage with a very big bird inside. I don't know what kind of bird it actually was. I just remember that it was big and that I thought it was a parrot. Thanks to cartoons and Sesame Street, I decided to talk to the parrot. Polly wants a cracker? Now I was back there for quite some time, changing up the sounds to find the bird's language. Suddenly my mom came and tugged on my arm, and in Spanish very sternly said we need to go now. When I turned around, I stopped as I saw that there was a small crowd gathering behind me, maybe 6 people or so. The cashier that had been up front when we came in came and took the enormous cage along with the bird towards the front. There was a blonde lady following him that for some reason I remember being Farrah Fawcett. No, it wasn't actually her. I just never seen hair quite that blonde before. My mom hurriedly grabbed my arm again and rushed me out of the store. I didn't see my brother yet, so I was confused and thought I might have gotten the bird in trouble. We sat at a bench across a ways from the pet shop and just sat there in silence. When we spotted my brother going in there, my mom told me to stay on the bench and not to move an inch. She walked back into the pet store and came out a few minutes later with my brother. This is as far as I remember. However, this incident came up in conversation with my mom several years later, and she filled me in on the rest. My brother walked in and heard a commotion and tried to look for us, but my mom caught up to him pretty quick. They both were stunned to see the blonde lady yelling at the cashier, and then the parrot, switching between them while the bird was clearly losing its little mind and flapping about the cage. Yes, she was yelling at a bird. My brother then relayed what the blonde lady was saying to my mom. I pay a lot of money for a talking bird. Make it talk. Make it talk. Give me a talking bird. It was implied to me that there was a lot of foul language that was omitted from the translation. This poor cashier was beside himself, just standing there trying to get a word in, and was shrinking back as this lady was right in his face. What, do you have a cassette playing back there to try to fool people into buying your stupid birds? I want a talking bird. That's what I paid for. Yeah, cassettes. I know I'm old. We still had a Betamax, too. At the time when my mom grabbed my arm the first time is when she heard the lady say buy amazing and bird, which were the only words she understood. She looked over at me and saw that it was me making the sounds and not the bird. She had no way of telling them that the bird never uttered even a chirp and that it was me the whole time, who happens to be able to imitate several animals perfectly. When she and my brother were in there, watching all hell being unleashed upon this cowering clerk, they both quietly discussed whether they should have my brother tell them what had actually happened. Once the lady started throwing what they think were dog biscuits, they turned tail and ran back to grab me and noped right on back to the car. My mom didn't know how much that lady spent on the bird, but she said it was definitely over $100, and this was in the early 80s. That poor bird. Point of interest. The crowd that had gathered just stood there staring at the spectacle, except for an old lady that had apparently been behind me for most of the time, who was cracking up but trying not to laugh loudly. My mom was pretty sure the old lady had figured out what I was doing long before the blonde lady even went back there. Old people are evil, y'all. So this happened a few years, and I'm not proud of it. So I am an awkward man in his 30s. I have this Karen neighbor. Karen is in her 40s, overweight, and extremely promiscuous. I'd placed my PS4 for sale on Facebook Marketplace, and Karen had found out from one of our other neighbors. So as Karen knocks on my door, and when I greeted Karen, she asked to come, and she immediately cut to the chase, so I hear you have a PS4 you no longer need. I reply, well, I'm selling it, because I want to get a Nintendo Switch it. She replies, oh nice, but I really want it. It's my son's birthday coming up, and he wants it. I tell her, sorry Karen, I can't give it away. She wasn't happy, but she left without saying anything. A few days later, I get a phone call from her asking if I still had the PS4, telling me to bring it to her house. She wanted to buy it. I still had it, so I obliged. I get there, and she invites me in and tells me to sit on the couch. Next thing I know, she is kissing me. I'm not proud, but I went with it. We make out for a few minutes. Next thing I know, she slaps me, then she punches me, then she is sitting on top of me. She was a heavy girl, so I couldn't push her off. She was screaming, pervert. Leave me alone. Eventually she lets me go, and I hightail it out of there. I leave the PS4 and realize that was her plan. Whenever she sees me, she laughs because she knows I won't report her to the cops because she could accuse me of something, plus I don't want my other neighbors to know I made out with her. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. I'm 20M and moved out of my parents' house at 18 because I really can't stand them. And it's for all of the kinds of reasons you can guess. They were jerks, favored my younger siblings, used me as free childcare, told me what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine, and all that nonsense. When I left, my dad told me not to let the door hit me on my way out and don't come back. I got the smallest and cheapest apartment I could find and have worked the same full-time job for 2 years. My parents didn't even hold out a month before calling me and begging me to come back home. Because without me, someone else had to watch my sibling. I refused because now I finally had time for myself. My dad eventually called me and actually demanded I move back home and pay them rent instead because family is more important than my personal independence. I said back to him that my life is important too. And for once, I'm getting to live for myself. So he basically said, well, then see how long you can last without us. And we didn't talk for months. I don't know what he was hoping for. I managed well enough by myself. My family seemed to slowly accept that I wasn't going to come crawling back, and over time, we seemed to mend things. I could tell they were having a hard time dealing with the fact things were on my terms and not theirs. They begged me to watch my youngest siblings from time to time, even though the two that are closest to me in age are in their mid-teens now. But my parents don't want to put babysitting on them any more than they have to, which is hypocritical of them since they tried to put it on me as much as possible. And yes, I've called them out on that. They responded with gaslighting and more months of silence yet again. And again, they were the ones to come crawling back to me for help. Not long ago, I bought myself a used Nintendo Switch, though I could only afford one game for it at the moment, which is Mario Kart. I got it bundled with the console for a good deal. My mom came by on a Saturday and asked me to watch my two youngest siblings for a while. She basically pushed them in the door at me and ran. And I was stuck with these two rowdy kids all day in my tiny apartment. My mom didn't come back until after 9, 0 p.m. And that was because I called her and made her come get the kids. And she really didn't like that I cut her fun time short. I said that unless she wanted to pay me, I wasn't going to be watching my siblings all day anymore. And next time, I won't even open the door, and I'll call the cops if she just leaves them outside. The next morning, I realized I couldn't find my Switch anywhere. So I called my parent, and like I thought, one of my siblings took it. I said I was coming over to get it right away. But my mom said it could wait because my youngest sibling was gaming on it. And she didn't have the heart to take it away. I said it was taken without my permission, and I will be taking it back. I got on my bike and rode there ASAP. And when I arrived, my sibling was crying because the Switch's battery had gone dead and they didn't have the charger. I told them to give it back. But my dad took it and said I can have it back when I agreed to start helping out with my siblings more. I told him if that's how he wanted to play this, I'd get the police involved. And no, I was not bluffing. He dug his heels in and insisted I wouldn't do it, until I pulled my phone out and started dialing. My mom yelled, "Wait," and hurriedly took my Switch back from my dad. He called her a traitor and demanded she return it to him instead of me. But she said it wasn't worth having the police called on them. Before leaving, I told them if this ever happens again, I'd be calling the police first. And if they want a Switch for my siblings so bad they can get their own. My dad yelled that I can't disrespect him like that. And I countered that even though I'm an adult, he's not bothered to ever show an ounce of respect to me. And I'd had enough. And I walked out with him yelling at me to come back and face him. Right now it's back to silence from them. My mom texted me once begging me to still watch my siblings. I said that if she wanted me to babysit so badly, she could pay me. And I'd only take the money in advance, because I'm not doing it for free anymore, especially after they stole from me and tried to keep from returning my property. They don't own me. I'm an adult with my own place and my own life. And they can either get used to it or get lost. It's been over a week since that text convo, and none of them have, as of yet, talked to me again. Which is fine. They can deal with their own messes. I've really loved sharing stories about my pops, my grandfather, the man who raised me, and I thought I would share another story of Pops just being Pops. He lived on the family farm his entire life, and that's where this takes place. It's mine now. The farm itself is a huge 80 acres of grazing and hay production land. Pops mostly raised cows and chickens and another 120 acres of forest marsh and wetlands. Up near the main house, Pops had his veggie and berry garden, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, all the berries Pops liked to make his own homebrew. Blame the Irish genes, I guess? On one fine summer morning in August of 2001, Pops is returning from town, and he is greeted by a couple in their 30s hauling to their car, which is parked at the front of our property, each with 4 tail buckets. Pops checked out what had been going on. Almost half the berry bushes had been stripped clean. He was not the type to fly off the handle, but he took a trip into town to look for the car, and he found it. It was a couple of out-of-towners, and Pops gave them a stern warning not to come back. The next morning, Pops was doing his normal start-of-the-day routine, making breakfast, doing chores, etc. As we got out, Pops saw this couple again hauling themselves back to their car, so he jumped into his truck, caught up to them and told them off and said if they ever come back, it's going to be hell for them. We woke up the next day to find tire tracks on the field and each and every berry bush stripped clean. We later found out they had been hitting up farmers markets selling fresh berries. Pops not being the kind of person to take things lying down, especially if someone is screwing with his future booze. There's a lot Pops did to ensure he was protected for the future, but I'm going to give you the short version. Pops decided to expand his berry operation to the entire field, as well as get the farm license to produce and sell berries. And early September, I remember this well, made me do half the work. We filled the entire front field and planted several hundred strawberry, raspberry, blackberry, blueberry bushes. One thing, they are perennial plants. The season they are planted will be a very light fruiting, but the next growing season they explode. Pops fenced off half the field and left a good portion open, easy access. Pops knew they would be back next year. He knew they believed they found a golden goose free money. Well, the start of next growing season, Pops had a special fertilizer ready for the open part of the field. Now, the thing about spraying the soil and plants with that isn't because they're not treated. I mean, even cow fertilizer is treated, but because in its raw state, the plants being sprayed daily well will make the berries putrid. It gets deep in them, and no amount of washing will get it out. And Pops sprayed every bush on the not-fenced side every day and waited. And as Pops predicted, summer of 2002, they came back and he cut them again, buckets in hand, hauling back to the car. Again, Pops confronted them with a stern warning about how they will regret eating the fruit. It wasn't even 24 hours later, and they were back this time with the law in tow, screaming up a fury that Pops tried to poison them. Pops just smiled and said, "I warned you not to come on my land and steal from me." The cops were about to tell them to just get lost and not come back when Pops said, "Oh, wait a minute." Pops came out with all his licenses packed in a little file folder and proving that he licensed his land that was already zoned for agricultural use as a licensed food production farm. The cops' eyes lit up like, "Oh, I know what you're getting at." You see, up here in Canada, it's a bit of a big crime to steal from a farm, even more so if it's got all the licenses to produce food. At this point, I was out on the porch watching everything go down. Maya and the cops screamed at them to sit down while he called back up. They ended up getting arrested and were taken off from our land in cuffs. So not only did they get a mouthful of human waste-filled berries, but walked out getting over a $10,000 fine. My late husband's ex is a crazy jerk. This isn't based on anything he said. He wasn't one to badmouth people in general. At the beginning of the relationship, all he said was, "That was a very bad time in my life, and I'd like to leave it in the past. I'd erase it if I could. A do-over where we never met would be better." As we got more serious, I learned more. She had cheated, tried to convince him to start a family with her, possibly because she was pregnant by one of her affair partners, and then maxed out all of their credit cards before leaving the country. He was stuck paying it off so it didn't affect his credit. She returned about a year before we started dating and tried to reconnect through mutuals. He had to change his number twice. The second time, he also cut out a considerable number of friends who had given his first new number to her. And then she somehow got my number. She sounded friendly enough, but one, how did she get my number and why was she calling me? Two, I have savvy, manipulative family members, and she wasn't even amateur hour compared to them. She tried to butter me up by saying we have so much in common because of our great taste in men, but there was something that I should know about him before things got too serious. She invoked the sisterhood and how she couldn't, in good conscience, stand by and say nothing when a fellow woman was about to make a big mistake. I let her talk because I wanted to know what kind of BA she would spew. After I hung up with Maya, my husband's social circle tightened a little more. Her social circle decreased, too. Specifically, she cut out a lot of people for allowing him to become engaged to me. How could they betray her and let that happen when she was his one and only soulmate? They were meant to be together, and would have been, if I didn't get in the way. She never really gave up, but we ignored her and blocked as needed. Fast forward. After my husband passed away, a friend called and nervously asked how I was feeling before leading up to whether I'd been on Facebook that day. The ex had posted a long, tearful post on his memorial page about her loss. How heartbreaking it was to know that she would never see her soulmate, the great love of her life, ever again. She included pictures of their engagement and wedding. She rambled about her utter emotional devastation and how no one could understand her great loss. I deleted the post and blocked her from the group. And my social circle once more decreased in size as I cut out the people who liked her post or offered support in the comments. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.